When my boss terminated me for taking sick leave after stomach issues, I graciously accepted his decision. "You're right, health isn't an excuse," I agreed. As a farewell gesture, I secretly ordered lunch for him under his wife's name. That afternoon, when a very important investors meeting started, the entire room went green. "You're right, health isn't an excuse. My name's Andre. I'm 39 years old and I've been pushing papers at Holligate Systems for 8 years. When my supervisor Gregory Winters told me I was terminated for taking too many sick days, I didn't argue. I just nodded and cleaned out my desk while he watched from his office doorway. The stomach bug had knocked me flat for 3 days straight. Couldn't keep anything down. Couldn't stand without feeling dizzy. My doctor wrote a note explaining it was a bacterial infection, but Gregory crumpled it up without reading past the first line. Said the company needed reliable employees, not people who called in sick every time they felt a little under the weather. I'd worked through fevers before. Came in with migraines with pulled muscles with a broken wrist that time I fell off my porch. But this bug was different. It hit like a freight train and left me emptying my stomach every 30 minutes. Even tried to come in on day 2, made it to the parking lot before I had to turn around and drive home. Gregory had been gunning for me since the quarterly review. I'd caught an error in his presentation to the board, pointed it out quietly in the hallway afterward. He fixed it, sure, but his face went red when I mentioned it. Started watching me closer after that, timing my lunch breaks, questioning every sick day, making comments about my productivity in front of the other account managers. The termination was effective immediately. No severance, no transition period. Just pack your things and go. I loaded my coffee mug and desk photos into a cardboard box while Gregory explained to anyone who'd listen that the company couldn't afford dead weight. That reliable attendance was the foundation of professional responsibility. I shook his hand when I left, thanked him for the opportunity to work at Holligate Systems. Told him I understood his position completely and harbored no hard feelings. His grip was firm, confident. He probably thought he'd handled the situation perfectly, but I noticed something when we shook hands. Gregory's wedding ring was loose on his finger, sliding around when he moved. Lost weight recently, probably from stress. The big investor meeting was coming up next week, the one he'd been preparing for since January. Holligate Systems was courting 3 major manufacturing companies, trying to land the biggest contract in company history. Gregory had mentioned the meeting obsessively for months. Talked about how it could make or break his career, how he'd finally prove himself to the board of directors, how everything had to be perfect. Perfect, that was Gregory's favorite word. I walked to my car with the cardboard box, thinking about perfection and timing and the stomach bug that had cost me my job. I'd built my life around routine and reliability. 8 years at Holligate Systems, handling procurement accounts for industrial equipment manufacturers. Not glamorous work, but steady. I knew every vendor, every delivery schedule, every contract detail. Clients trusted me because I never let them down. My dad always said a man's word was his bond. Spent 35 years at the same steel mill. Never missed a day unless he was in the hospital. Raised me to believe that showing up was 90% of success. That's how I'd lived my career until the stomach bug hit. Gregory had been my supervisor for 2 years. Before that, he was just another account manager. Same level as me, but he had connections. His wife's brother sat on the board, helped him get promoted when the previous supervisor retired. Gregory never forgot who didn't congratulate him enthusiastically enough when he got the job. I'd made that mistake. When they announced his promotion, I shook his hand and said, "Congratulations," without much enthusiasm. Didn't think it mattered at the time. But Gregory remembered everything, cataloged every slight, real or imagined, started questioning my decisions, making me copy him on emails I'd handled independently for years. The warning signs were there, little comments about my attitude, questions about whether I was fully committed to the team. But I kept my head down, did my work, figured he'd eventually back off. My performance reviews were solid, clients liked working with me. I thought that would be enough. 3 weeks ago, Gregory started asking about my personal life, whether I was planning any vacations, if I had any health issues he should know about. Said it was just good management, making sure he could plan around potential absences. I told him I was healthy as a horse. Hadn't taken a sick day in 18 months, then the stomach bug hit on a Tuesday. Called in at 6 a.m. Left a voicemail explaining I couldn't keep food down. Gregory called back an hour later, asked if I was sure I couldn't tough it out. Said the Morrison Industries account needed attention. Couldn't wait until I felt better. I tried to work from home answering emails between trips to the bathroom. But by Wednesday, I was too weak to focus on anything. Called in again, got Gregory's voicemail. Left another message explaining the situation. He never called back. Thursday morning I felt human again. Weak, but functional. Came in early, caught up on everything I'd missed. Gregory walked past my desk 3 times without acknowledging me. Finally, at 4 p.m., he called me into his office. "This isn't working out," he said, sliding the termination paperwork across his desk. "We need people we can count on." I signed the papers without reading them. Shook his hand, walked out like a professional. but I remembered what my dad used to say about men who kicked others when they were down. That evening, sitting in my truck in the Holligate Systems parking lot, everything became clear. I wasn't angry about being fired. I was angry about being humiliated. Gregory hadn't just terminated me for being sick. He'd made sure everyone in the office knew why. Talked loudly about unreliable employees while I packed my desk. Made comments about people who couldn't handle a little stomach upset. Turned my illness into a character flaw, a moral failing. I'd given 8 years to that company. Worked weekends when deadlines loomed. Covered for coworkers when they had emergencies. Built relationships with vendors that saved Holligate thousands in procurement costs. And Gregory had reduced all of that to 3 days with a stomach bug. The humiliation was surgical. Precise. He'd waited until the afternoon to fire me. Made sure the maximum number of people could witness my walk of shame. Timed it perfectly so I'd carry the embarrassment through the weekend. Let it sink in properly. But Gregory had one weakness. He was a creature of habit, predictable as clockwork. Same lunch every day. Turkey sandwich from the deli down the street, ordered through their delivery app. Always ate at his desk while reviewing afternoon meetings. Never varied the routine. Next week's investor meeting was his moment of truth. Representatives from 3 major manufacturing companies, including Morrison Industries. The account he'd been so worried about when I called in sick. The meeting Gregory had been preparing for since January. The one that would determine his future at Holligate Systems. I sat in my truck, remembering the stomach bug. How it had hit without warning. Turned my insides to liquid fire. How helpless I'd felt. How impossible it would have been to function normally. How Gregory had shown zero sympathy. Zero understanding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Gregory had fired me for something completely beyond my control. A bacterial infection that could hit anyone. Anytime. Something that could ruin the most important day of someone's career if the timing was wrong. Perfect timing. Gregory's favorite concept. I started my truck and drove home, thinking about delivery apps and lunch orders and the fine line between justice and revenge. Gregory had taught me that reliability was everything. That a man's reputation could be destroyed by a single moment of weakness. Next Tuesday, when those investors walked into the conference room expecting to see a polished presentation from a composed executive, they'd learned something about timing and reliability and the unpredictable nature of stomach bugs. Gregory wanted perfection. I was going to give him exactly what he deserved. The plan was already forming in my mind. Simple and elegant. No violence. No property damage. No obvious sabotage. Just a little food poisoning at exactly the wrong moment. Sometimes justice required perfect timing. Monday morning I called Holligate Systems and asked to speak with Gregory. The receptionist transferred me to his office and he picked up on the second ring. Gregory, it's Andre. I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to work at Holligate. I know you made the right decision. Silence on the other end. Then, Andre, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I've been thinking about what you said. About reliability and professional responsibility. You were absolutely right. Health isn't an excuse for letting the team down. Well, I'm glad you understand. No hard feelings, I hope. None at all. Actually, I wanted to ask a favor. I know the big investor meeting is tomorrow and I remembered you mentioning how important it is. I'd like to send you something as a congratulations gift. A good luck gesture. Gregory's tone warmed slightly. That's very thoughtful of you, Andre. Unexpected but thoughtful. What's your favorite lunch? I'd like to have something delivered to your office before the meeting. Consider it a peace offering. You don't need to do that. I insist. You've got enough stress without worrying about lunch. Let me handle this one small thing. Gregory paused, probably weighing the gesture against his natural suspicion. But pride won out. As I knew it would. He liked the idea of his former employee acknowledging his importance, showing proper deference. Well, if you insist. I usually get the Turkey Club from Meridian Deli. They know my order. I wrote down the name, knowing I wouldn't be calling them. Perfect. I'll make sure it arrives before the meeting. Good luck tomorrow, Gregory. I know you'll do great. After hanging up, I drove to the other side of town, to a small deli I'd never visited before. The kind of place that changed owners every few years, where food safety standards might be more relaxed. I ordered a Turkey Club sandwich, paid in cash, and watched them prepare it. The meat looked fine, but I noticed the mayonnaise container sitting in direct sunlight by the window. The lettuce was a little brown around the edges. The bread wasn't quite fresh, nothing obviously spoiled, but certainly not the pristine quality Gregory was accustomed to. I drove home and carefully unwrapped the sandwich. Added my own touches, a thin layer of mayonnaise that had been sitting in my warm car for 2 hours. A few drops of milk that had passed its expiration date by 3 days. Nothing that would cause serious harm, but enough to guarantee gastrointestinal distress within a few hours of consumption. The beauty was in the simplicity. No exotic poisons. No obviously tampered packaging. Just slightly off food that would cause exactly the same symptoms I'd experienced with my stomach bug. The kind of food poisoning that hits fast and hits hard, making it impossible to function normally. I rewrapped the sandwich carefully, making sure it looked untouched. Then I called the delivery service Gregory used, posing as his wife. Ordered his usual turkey club for delivery tomorrow at 11 a.m., exactly 1 hour before the investor meeting. "This is Beth Winters," I said, deepening my voice slightly. "My husband Gregory works at Holligate Systems. I'd like to surprise him with lunch before his big meeting." The person on the phone was happy to help. I gave them Gregory's office address and paid with a prepaid credit card I'd bought at the grocery store. Left specific instructions to deliver it directly to Mr. Winters in the executive suite. Tuesday morning I drove past Holligate Systems and parked across the street. Watched the delivery driver walk into the building at exactly 11 a.m., carrying a bag with my specially prepared sandwich. Watched him walk out empty-handed 5 minutes later. Gregory would eat his lunch while reviewing his presentation notes. The meeting would start at noon. The symptoms would hit sometime between 12:30 and 1 p.m., right in the middle of his pitch to the investors. Perfect timing, just like Gregory always insisted on. I drove home and waited for the news. By 3 p.m. I still hadn't heard anything from my contacts at Holligate Systems. I called Jake Morrison, an old friend who worked in accounting, claiming I'd left something in my desk and wanted to know if it was safe to come by. "Andre, man, you picked a hell of a day to call. All chaos over here. What's going on?" Gregory completely lost it during the investor meeting, started puking right in the middle of his presentation, had to run out of the conference room, left 25 executives sitting there staring at his PowerPoint slides. I tried to sound concerned. Food poisoning? That's what everyone's saying. But the timing couldn't have been worse. These were the Morrison Industries people, the Fallon Manufacturing Group, and that big outfit from Phoenix. Biggest potential contract in company history. Did they reschedule? Jake laughed bitterly. "Are you kidding?" After Gregory painted the conference table green, they walked out before he even came back. Said they'd lost confidence in Holligate's professionalism and leadership. The news was better than I'd hoped. I'd expected Gregory to get sick and maybe miss part of the meeting. I hadn't anticipated him vomiting in front of the investors themselves. What's the company saying? Official story is that Gregory had a sudden illness, unavoidable circumstances. But word is getting around that the investors were not impressed. 3 major contracts gone. Board's in emergency session right now. Think Gregory will recover from this? Hard to say. His wife's brother on the board might protect him, but losing those contracts? That's millions in revenue. Heads are going to roll. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in days. Gregory's humiliation was complete and public, witnessed by the most important people in his professional world. The same man who'd fired me for being sick had lost the biggest opportunity of his career to the exact same problem. But as the afternoon wore on, I started hearing more details. Jake called back around 5 p.m. with updates from the office. "It gets worse, man. Turns out the Morrison Industries contract was already half signed. They were just here for the final presentation and paperwork. Now they're talking about going with our biggest competitor instead. How's Gregory taking it? Haven't seen him since he got sick. Rumor is he went home after the meeting and hasn't answered his phone. Board's been trying to reach him all afternoon. And the other investors? Fallon Manufacturing issued a statement saying they're reassessing their vendor relationships. Translation, we're screwed. The Phoenix Group didn't even bother with a statement. Just sent word through their lawyers that they're withdrawing from negotiations. The magnitude of what I'd accomplished was sinking in. This wasn't just embarrassment for Gregory. This was potential career destruction. Company-wide layoffs, millions in lost revenue. The stomach bug I'd given him had triggered a cascade of consequences far beyond what I'd imagined. Part of me felt guilty about the innocent employees who might lose their jobs, but then I remembered Gregory's smug face when he fired me. His lecture about reliability and professional responsibility. His complete lack of empathy when I'd been genuinely sick. He taught me that a single moment of weakness could destroy everything you'd built. That reputation was fragile and unforgiving. That timing was everything in business. I'd simply given him a practical demonstration of his own philosophy. The man who'd fired me for having a stomach bug had just lost the biggest deal in company history to an identical illness. The irony was perfect, almost poetic. Justice had a sense of humor after all. Wednesday morning brought news that exceeded my wildest expectations. The local business journal ran a story about Holligate Systems' catastrophic presentation failure that had cost them 3 major contracts worth an estimated $12 million in annual revenue. The article was brutal. It described how Gregory had suddenly become violently ill during a crucial investor presentation, forcing the meeting to end early and causing potential clients to question the company's leadership stability. Industry analysts were quoted saying the incident would likely damage Holligate's reputation for years. But the real bombshell came Thursday afternoon. Jake Morrison called with news from inside the company. Gregory's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Investigation into what? Board wants to know how he could have such bad timing. They're looking into whether he was drinking, taking medication, had any warning signs, basically trying to figure out if this was preventable or if he's just unreliable. The irony was beautiful. Gregory was being investigated for the same unreliability he'd accused me of having. His career was being dissected the same way he'd questioned my professionalism during that termination meeting. What kind of investigation? Full background check, review of his recent performance, Interviews with his subordinates about his fitness for leadership. They're even checking his medical records to see if he has any history of digestive issues. I almost laughed. Gregory's medical records would show nothing unusual, which would only make the board more suspicious. A healthy executive doesn't just randomly vomit during the most important meeting of his career unless something is seriously wrong with his judgment or preparation. Any word on when he might come back? Doesn't look good. Word is the board's considering a complete management restructuring. Too much damage to the company's reputation. Investors are spooked. Existing clients are asking questions. Someone has to take the fall. Friday brought the final piece of news I've been waiting for. The Business Journal reported that Holligate Systems had mutually agreed to part ways with Gregory Winters, effective immediately. The company was conducting a nationwide search for new leadership and implementing new protocols to ensure the reliability of executive performance. The article mentioned that Gregory had declined to comment, but a source close to the board described his departure as necessary for restoring client confidence. They were essentially throwing him under the bus to salvage whatever reputation the company had left. I thought about calling Gregory to offer condolences but decided against it. The man who'd humiliated me for being sick had just experienced professional humiliation, on a scale that would follow him for the rest of his career. Any executive position he applied for in the future would require him to explain why he'd vomited during the most important presentation of his career. The beauty of my revenge was its invisibility. Nobody suspected sabotage because food poisoning was perfectly plausible. Gregory himself probably believed he'd just had incredibly bad luck with timing. The delivery had come from his usual service, ordered by his wife, completely normal and expected. There was no evidence, no trail leading back to me. Just a man who'd been fired for being sick, watching his former supervisor suffer the same fate for the same symptoms. The cosmic justice was perfect. Gregory had taught me that reputation was everything in business. That one moment of weakness could destroy years of work. That timing was the difference between success and failure. He'd been absolutely right. And now he was living proof of his own philosophy. The student had become the teacher, and the lesson was complete. 3 weeks after Gregory's termination, I received an unexpected phone call. The new interim executive director of Holligate Systems wanted to meet with me about returning to the company. Mr. Anderson, we've reviewed your employment record and spoken with several clients who specifically requested to work with you again. We'd like to discuss bringing you back in a senior capacity. I met with the new management team that Tuesday. They offered me Gregory's old position as procurement supervisor, with a 20% salary increase and a formal apology for what they called the previous management's short-sighted decision. We understand you were terminated during a legitimate illness, the interim director explained. That doesn't reflect our company values. We want to make this right. I accepted the position and started the following Monday. My old desk had been cleared out, but they'd given me Gregory's former office. The same place where he'd fired me for being unreliable was now my workspace. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the building. The man who'd been fired for having a stomach bug was now supervising the department, while the man who'd fired him was unemployed and unemployable. Word had spread through the industry about Gregory's spectacular failure. No reputable company would hire an executive who'd vomited during a crucial investor meeting. My first week back, I implemented new policies for sick leave and employee health support, made it clear that legitimate illness would never be grounds for termination. The staff appreciated the changes, especially those who'd witnessed Gregory's harsh treatment of sick employees. The Morrison Industries contract was still available. Their representatives agreed to meet with Holligate's new management team, impressed by our commitment to treating employees professionally. I personally handled the procurement aspects of their account, building the relationship Gregory had destroyed with his unprofessional behavior. Within 2 months, we'd not only secured the Morrison contract, but also begun negotiations with the other 2 companies Gregory had driven away. The Business Journal ran a follow-up story about Holligate's remarkable recovery under new leadership. 6 months later, I was promoted to Vice President of Operations. The company had not only recovered from Gregory's disaster, but had grown stronger, landing contracts worth $15 million in annual revenue. The board credited the turnaround to responsible leadership and professional management. I never heard from Gregory directly, but Jake Morrison kept me updated on his situation. He'd moved out of state after failing to find work locally. His wife had filed for divorce, citing the stress of his unemployment and the public humiliation. The brother-in-law on the board had distanced himself completely, refusing to provide references or recommendations. The man who'd built his career on reliability and professional image had become a cautionary tale about the importance of timing and reputation. Every potential employer who searched his name found stories about the executive who'd vomited during the biggest presentation of his career. Meanwhile, I'd become known as the supervisor who'd overcome wrongful termination to lead his company's recovery. Industry publications had written articles about my leadership during crisis, my commitment to employee welfare, and my role in rebuilding client relationships. The stomach bug that had cost me my job had ultimately given me a better career than I'd ever imagined. Gregory's attempt to humiliate me had backfired so completely that he destroyed himself while elevating me. I kept a photo on my desk from the ribbon-cutting ceremony when we opened our new facility. In it, I was shaking hands with the Morrison Industries executive who'd walked out of Gregory's disastrous presentation. The caption read, "Building relationships through reliable leadership." Every morning, looking at that photo reminded me that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's own cruelty come back to haunt them. Gregory Winters never recovered from his professional downfall. His attempts to find executive positions were repeatedly thwarted by the industry-wide knowledge of his spectacular failure during the investor meeting. The stress of unemployment and public humiliation destroyed his marriage, cost him his social standing, and forced him to accept entry-level positions far beneath his qualifications. He spent the rest of his career explaining why he'd vomited during the most important presentation of his life, a question that haunted every job interview and networking opportunity. Sometimes the worst punishment is watching someone's own cruelty destroy everything they've worked to build.